Ho, ho, oh no. Bryant here for Directus, one of our growth engineers. I wanted to take this video and run through our salty open source Santa project, how this thing was actually built. We'll run through like a quick overview of how it all works. I'll give you guys some of the behind the scenes, like ideation. How did this thing come together? We'll jump into the tech stack, and then we'll actually dive through some of the features inside the actual code base and kind of give you the peek behind the scenes of how it all comes together to create such an interesting little project. So let's fire up open source Salty Santa and take a look at how this thing works. So you may have already seen this. This may be your first interaction with it, but basically the Salty open source Santa is the open source community's naughty or nice list. Salty open source Santa is going to determine whether your open source contributions were good enough to put you on the nice list. So to do that, you're going to sign in with GitHub. This does not like fetch any private data or anything like that. And then you will write your letter to Santa, tell him what you want. Some amazing wool socks or something like that, whatever you want. You can also enter friend mode where you can send a letter on behalf of a friend. And because this is open source, when you send it to Santa, he is going to analyze your GitHub profile. So all of your public activity, your commits, your pull requests, your stars, your followers, he's going to assign a naughty or nice score for you. And then he is going to write you a scathing letter back. So you can see I probably just barely made the nice list, but Santa is still not happy with me in his letter. Hey, Brian, I've been watching you, and let me tell you that your GitHub profile is as impressive as a melted snowman. It stings a little bit, Santa. Be nice to me, friend. Come on now. So what this does, it is just a LLM AI generated letter, basically a wrapper, if you will. That's what everybody is calling these. A fun little project. So we will potentially show some members of your organization over here to roast them as well. You can show this publicly, which is enabled by default. I can turn this on or off. We've got some standard share buttons, and then the one question that I get a lot over here is the spicy meter. So, we kind of knew coming into this that some of these takes from Santa would be spicier than others, might be funnier. All this should be taken with a grain of salt. It's all AI generated, could be way off base, but it's in good fun, in the spirit of fun. But the spiciness meter is just the way to upvote this thing. And then if you check out Santa's list, you can see that these are sorted in order of spiciness. So the spiciest takes gravitate towards the top, and you can also roast organizations as well as user profiles, which makes for very interesting letters from Santa. And that's open source Santa, right? Just a fun little project. Little LLM wrapper. Now, let's dive into the ideation behind this thing. So how did we come up with this idea? And basically, as a lot of things start within our team here at Directus, somebody has an idea. We workshop it a bit internally. This is a colleague of mine, John Daniels. We were discussing what would be a fun Christmas theme. Last year we did a 12 days of CMS where we had all of the team members sing, and we put together the whole song on social media. It was a blast. I enjoyed it. We wanted to do a Christmas promotion this year. We started thinking about that, and John Daniels was like, "Hey, let's scan a letter, have it transcribed, and write a letter back." Me being a smartass, if you will, I said, "Hey, let's do something snarkier. Maybe we ask your name, you write a letter to Santa, and he writes you a roast letter back." And riggedy jig, away we go. So the first iteration of this was actually an episode for 100 apps, 100 hours. So AI letters from Santa, started small, gradually keeps layering on. So 100 apps, 100 hours is a show on Directus TV where basically I have 1 hour to build an app. And you can just quickly watch through this whole thing. We can see basically where we get to. What does the end result look like at the end here? We can kind of see it's a little underwhelming over there, right? This is not beautiful as it is now. Obviously things start small, but there is the beginnings of this thing. And if you want to check this out, this will be on Directus TV. So that is the ideation behind this. Let's dive into the actual tech stack, right? So what powers this application? What makes the whole thing run? The backend is Directus. So Directus is a headless CMS backend, best of both worlds. And you can see here inside the backend, we've got our profiles that get generated. So we're storing those profiles. I can obviously manage those here. We've got our likes. We've got a couple of other collections for things like globals, like help content, the site title and site description. And then we've got a metrics collection that I'm not actually populating any metrics with at the moment. But Directus allows me to basically quickly create this data model and then get a REST API that I can then call inside the actual code base. Now, it's a pretty lightweight as far as Directus instances are concerned. So just the 4 collections. Underneath the hood, it's a PostgreSQL database. Anytime I add a collection or a field to one of my data models, Directus will mirror those changes to that Postgres database and make sure those APIs are updated for me. So it's a really great tool to quickly build backends. On the front end, we have Nuxt.js. Specifically, we're using the Nuxt UI library, the alpha version. So it is using Radix View, Tailwind CSS version 4 beta. Never know quite how to pronounce it. But lots of fun little tricks that we're doing on the front end that I'll show you as we dive into the code base. And then for the AI LLM piece, we are using Anthropic, so Claude 3.5 Sonnet. In my own testing, I found that it worked a little bit better as far as like the snark and the humor than ChatGPT or OpenAI. Take that as you will. Then we were using the Vercel AI SDK to communicate with the Anthropic API. As of right now, I couldn't find a JSON mode. And obviously when we send that letter off to Santa, we want to get back JSON data. All right, so that is the actual tech stack for this thing. Let's dive into like some of the features, and maybe I could pull the code base up side by side and the actual site. We'll just start at the top, right? One of the first things that you'll notice on the homepage when you land there, you've got this toggle for friend mode. So we wanted the ability to not only send a letter to Santa yourself, but on behalf of a friend and send them the results of that letter. So the friend mode is basically a toggle which will update the query parameters. I can go in and then search any GitHub profile that I want and add a letter to Santa for them. So what we do in that situation is in the actual prompt. So if we take a look at like the roast here, and I'll just zoom out a little bit, you can kind of see what this endpoint looks like. So Nuxt is a full stack meta framework for Vue. And we're using the Nuxt server routes pretty heavily in this specific project. So you can see on my roast endpoint here, we're using Zod for some validation. We've got the AI payload schema that we're wanting to get back. We've got here's our actual body schema that we're validating from this specific route. And then basically we pass a lot of this data into our specific prompt, right? You are the open source Santa Claus. You determine whose open source contributions are naughty or nice. Analyze the profile. And then you can see, like, if the mode is friend mode, we're going to pass that in. And we're also passing the user that roasted. We wanted to add some accountability there so that you know, you're not getting roasted by someone on the internet. You're going to know who roasted you, and you can roast them back accordingly. You know, we're trying to make this fun. So what is the next on my feature list? If you take a look at you know, like the actual letter, we've got like salty open source Santa here. This is totally AI generated. A lot of the assets that I used here were generated off of Replicate. So if I try to find the model, it is recraft v3 SVG. So this is the model that I used to create Salty Santa, and I use this one specifically because it generates a vector SVG image that I can then drop into Figma, poke around with, right? And I could show you just behind the scenes here what my ideation kind of files look like behind the scenes here. So this is just like a quick concept. But I love playing around with the different models on Replicate. It makes it super easy for me. I'm, you know, not deep into Python and ML, so being able to spin these up and, you know, quickly test these things out and put together quick little applications with them, good for me, right? I love that part. What else? So we've got this nice and naughty gauge, or the naughty or nice gauge, right? This was actually one that was fairly, we wanted to kind of give the sense of suspense when you are actually waiting for your letter from Santa. And I couldn't think of like the best paradigm for this, like a gauge or a meter here was what we ended up with. And it kind of just stole the site design from some stock clip art that I had seen on the website on Google or something like that, that I tried to replicate. So this is all like me just designing inside Figma. And then we take this SVG, and if I show you the naughty or nice gauge here, we've taken this SVG and we've basically made a monster view component out of it. So it controls the animation. You know, if we dive into this, we're passing a list as a prop. Is this going to animate or not? We've got sound effects using view, use, sound in this project. And then we have some animation here, like swinging this actual needle. And then based on that rotation value, we highlight, as you can see here, where that needle is over. And then finally, we kick over to the final list. So I love fun little projects like this because we get to stretch creative muscles a little bit. This was one of the more fun parts of this project, designing that gauge. All right, next up, the spiciness meter. This one is like surprisingly simple on the front end, right? We've got this meter. I can take spice away. I can add spice to it. Right-clicking or left-clicking to increase. And then it's basically debouncing behind the scenes. But this came from Josh Comeau's blog. I think that's how you pronounce it, Josh. Please don't get mad at me if I mispronounced it and you're checking this out. But he's got this little heart for the likes, and then eventually you reach like a max. But I love this concept. It's playful, it's interactive, and it's better than 99% of what's out there on like social media platforms for engagement. So just a nice little thing. Again, a totally custom type of setup here, and you'll notice that I am using cursor. I did use cursor quite a bit in actually like creating some of these animations. That was very helpful in like prototyping and getting this like to a point where it actually worked well. So you can see we've got like the spice levels here, and I wanted this to go from green to red to show like, hey, this is very spicy. When you get to the top, it plays a train whistle, steam whistle sound. So we get the initial likes data from an API endpoint, and you'll notice if I navigate away and I come back to my own profile, you can see that I'm already maxed out. And how is that actually done? I just straight copied this from this idea from Josh's blog post on how he set this up. But if we take a look at the actual API endpoint for this, let's find our username. We've got our likes here. So whenever you like this, we are picking up the IP address, and then we've got a helper function that basically creates a hash for that IP address. So we grab that IP, we add a salt to it, create a hash for it, so that we're not storing that IP address. Nobody on our team can see that information, but we have a unique identifier per visitor that we can then use to make sure that somebody doesn't like this a million times or unlike it a million times. So again, just one of my other favorite little features. We store those in Directus. As far as getting the likes back, if we look at the likes.get, we can see here we have a couple of helper functions, and we're using the aggregate parameters inside Directus. So Directus allows us to aggregate and group data across an entire collection very quickly and easily via the API. The naughty or nice score. So originally, the post was like the actual, we were giving that discretion to Santa. And we told Santa to set a high bar for the nice list. And what we found was every single person who got roasted ended up being on the naughty list, which definitely didn't feel fair to contributors like Lee Robinson over at Vercel or Evan Yu at Vue. Like these guys should not be on the open source naughty list. They do a lot. So, we tried to figure out and kind of come up with a way to actually figure out this. I was originally using the GitHub REST APIs for this. If we go back to our roast, we can kind of see where this specific piece is at. So, we're checking if a profile exists in Directus. We're going to redirect. We make sure you're logged in before we actually allow you to submit a roast. And then we get into the GitHub GraphQL API. And the reason why we're reaching for the GitHub GraphQL API is because on a user profile, I can get all of the standard data. I can get their README. I can get things like starred repositories, followers. I can get their organizations. We could see that we have repositories here with the READMEs. And we can also get contributions. So this basically gives us a summary of all the repository contributions, issues, commits, pull requests, etc. That makes it really easy to quantify that score. And then we just have a helper function that goes through and quantifies that score. So it's called calculate nice score. This is way overblown than what I would have imagined, but this felt pretty good once we got to the end of it. This thing is totally over-engineered, but hey, a lot of nice, neat little functionality baked in. So we've got a commit where commit is worth 1 point. You get 2 points per PR, 3 points if you add a review because nobody likes doing reviews. If you add an issue, you get 0.5 points per issue, and then you get 2 points per follower. So that goes into your score. And then we add some other things like total stars. So you get 2 points for each star for your public repos. And then we have negative signals. So like if you have forked a repository and you have not pushed any code within 6 months, we are penalizing you -2 points for that. And then the big kicker here, open source and why this thing is salty, right? Open source has a reputation, like it or not. Sponsorships are a great way to give back, especially for people who are, maintaining pieces of infrastructure that we all use on a day-to-day basis. If you've got the means, sponsor some of these. Find folks maintaining open source repos without any compensation at all. So sponsorships, if you're sponsoring someone, we give you 25 points for sponsorship. Then we have a couple of multipliers in here. We got a little carried away with this. If you have over 500 stars in a repo, you get a 20% bonus. If you're a part of an organization, you get a 10% bonus, etc. So that is how the naughty or nice score works. We're going to open source this entire repository, so you can certainly dive deeper into the code. Trying to think if there's any other things that are really super interesting with this. Probably not. I think that's it. Let's wrap this thing up. I hope you enjoyed this project. I had a lot of fun building it. With that, go enjoy Open Source Santa and have a Merry Christmas.